Dear Wyveryn, if you're reading this, then you figured out how to open up my little box. Good for you, kid. Call me sentimental, but I always enjoyed a good puzzle. Kind of prepares you for what you're about to read, I guess. My name is General Lux. I was born in a dismal little hole of a town called Drearywick. Nothing but swamps and sadness. My father was a chandler. My mother was a whore who sometimes served beer at the local tavern. Neither of them amounted to anything, and there was no expectations for me to become more than I was. None but that which I placed upon myself. I had big dreams, and well, let's be honest, I stank at making candles. And while I wanted to serve, I didn't want to serve beer. I wanted to serve my kingdom. So when General Lux marched his army through my little town, I tossed all my belongings into a bag, and I went along with them. And that's the last I ever saw of my parents or Drearywick. That's the day I became a man. I served well under General Lux, and with the help of my fellow new recruit, Simeon Okra, I began to climb through the ranks. Wherever I went, I took Simeon with me, because without him, I would have been nothing. Nobody. Simeon just seemed to have a way with people. He never wanted the power for himself. He just knew who to talk to, when and how. He was a good soldier, too. Saved my life. Twice. That's a record, you know. I was doing just fine. We served as field officers in the Duchy of Deargon, studied sword mastery under the tactics and the tutelage of the King of Matsudai. And finally, I earned my status as captain while brawling in Makarona. I became the #1 advisor to General Lux. We battled rioting rebels, mastered the creatures of the depths of Kothram, and it was Lux who entrusted me to Kothram's secrets, which are too many and too dangerous to put into writing. But Lux sent me on many missions, and in all my years, I never lost a battle. They said my military tactics were beyond measure, better than Lux himself. I, the son of a chandler, was a martial prodigy. But I had a secret, and only Okra knew. Back when I was a nobody, when I was just a petty officer, I met a girl in Stonehold. We were both young, not even 20 summers. But I lost my head. I fell for her hard. And by day I was in basic training, but by night I was in her arms. Okra tried to talk some sense into me, but I had no sense. I had every intention of marrying her when I was a somebody. That's right, when they shipped me off to Deargon, and I promised I'd come back for her as soon as I reached my place in life. Problem was, I never got there. I never felt like I'd risen high enough. I never felt like I was good enough. And with Okra in my ear, I grew weak. I was swayed. I stopped writing her letters. Soon, I stopped receiving hers. And though I regret it to this day, I never saw her again. I made my choice. I lived with it every day. Lux died at the Battle of the Rebellion. That twilight, a man came to me in my quarters. He claimed to be her son, my son. So there I stood, speechless like an idiot, while this man, this grown man, glared at me as if expecting me to do a trick. Now he had no papers and he had no proof, but he was the right age, mid to late 20s, and he looked like her, with his dark features and his slender build. And dear help me, he had my nose. Probably not such a good thing for him, but God, that noggin is so unfortunately unmistakable you can spot it in the next town over. Now there was no warmth in his voice. It was clear he'd been raised to hate me. I can't say that I blame him. I left his mother pregnant, unmarried, and with no word of my whereabouts. He didn't come for fame or glory. He came for money. But here's the funny part. It wasn't for him. It was for his child. His son. My grandchild. You know, I had so many questions. What had his life been like? What did he do for a living? Where did he live? Was his mother alive? And if so, where was she? But he only retorted with angry one-word answers, and he mentioned he had heard I had informally adopted a son among the ranks of my men. He acted like that was the ultimate betrayal. Well, I couldn't lie. It was true, and I did not regret it. At that time, Aroth had become like the son I never knew I had. But even as I write this letter, I have just finished signing the formal adoption papers. Upon my death, half of what I possess will go to Aroth, but I saved the other half for my son and my grandchild. That would be you, Wyveryn. I didn't find out until after my meeting with my son that his wife was an elf. Though I couldn't have openly supported such a union, I secretly applaud his will to defy the laws and do what he thinks is right. You know, we can't choose who we love, kid. I don't know much, but I do know that. Okra worked busily to cover up my secret. I let him handle that. I was never good with relationships, and though I could face 10 Mach Ronins in an unarmed combat, I could never seem to muster up the courage to meet you. They say my son was killed in a raid at Tradesdale. I never saw him again. My contacts also informed me about the death of your mother prior to that. I can only say I am very sorry for both your losses, which would explain what happened next in your life. Every path you took, every person you met, they were sent by me, Wyveryn. They worked for me. And when you were sent to Cothran to join the army, it was so I could keep a watchful eye on you. Now you're nothing like my son, Aroth. You know, you would have made a terrible soldier. I knew that as sure as I knew I was never meant to be a chandler. But you find your path, boy. It just may be a little rockier than the rest of ours. In this box are the deeds to my property in the western Fearwood Forest regions, an estate called Little River. Now don't worry, I took into consideration that you're as much nomad as any gypsy. Now it's no castle, but it is a fine manor with 100 acres of beautiful wooded land. I bought it as a retirement plan, but I suppose I always knew I could never retire. I expect by the time you're reading this, I will have died heroically in some battle. It is my greatest wish. As to Aroth, I have left all his land holdings and fortune in Okra's keeping. He is the only one I trust with it, and though you two may not be blood related, perhaps one day you can meet and even come to consider each other as family. He is, after all, a half-blood like you. He's a good man when he's not being pig-headed and stubborn, that Aroth. Now, I hope you will not harbor any resentments against me as your father and grandmother did, though if you do, you have every right. Just know that I did the best I knew how, and that's all that any man can ever do.